Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and this week I'm talking to Brandon Roberts. He has a PhD in muscle biology, he is a natural bodybuilder, and we're talking all about his current contest prep. He's just stepped off stage, and he's actually currently in another peak week for an additional show, and we talk about all his season and his also past history, and where he's come from and where he is now, and how he pursues bodybuilding and how he views his goals in the context of that too. We dive into all things from his peak weeks, what he's doing with sodium, water, carbohydrates, step counts versus cardio, and also his posing and the importance of posing. I also get his updated thoughts surrounding protein timing, amounts and importance of leucine. Given all the recent literature that came out on the topic, I thought he'd be a great person to get some different perspectives on all of that. So if you're a bodybuilding enthusiast, you'll absolutely love this episode. Tons of gold to be found inside. And if you did enjoy it, please do make sure to subscribe, because I'm talking to bodybuilders and researchers all the time on this podcast. And to share it with anyone else you think might be interested, make sure to tag myself and Brandon so that we know you enjoyed it and listened to it over on Instagram. And without further ado, let's get into the show. So Brandon, we're just talking off air, and you were mentioning how you're on the podcast. I think you said it was episode 385. I think that's what you said. It was 10 months ago now. So it's been quite a while. And I was like, wow, it really has been quite a long time. And you've been up to something, right? I don't know how much of that time you've been dieting, but you just stepped off stage and you're truly deep in contest prep season at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So competed about 5 or 6 days ago, first show of the season. So, I haven't competed since 2019. And I was had to get back into it, get some rust knocked off. Kind of the couple weeks before the show, I was grinding quite hard. But now, because I'm doing another show this weekend, so in a few days, I'm in between, and I'm kind of I'm not grinding to lose weight. I'm just resetting and peaking again. But yeah, I've been in prep for 7 months, down 22 pounds. So from and I'm 5'8", 5'7.5", 5'8", depending on the day. So I was 165, 167-ish, floating around there. About 18% body fat, because we have DEXAs in the lab, so I just hop on a DEXA. And now I'm down to 144 pre peak, carb loading, basically. And I haven't got a body fat yet, because I think I might still get a little leaner. So we'll see.
Yeah, DEXAs, I had one DEXA gifted during my last prep. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have got it, because I don't really care in a sense, because I'm hey, the judges aren't going to ask what my DEXA is. They're just looking at how lean I am on stage. But I think it came out as over 10%. And I was just I knew there's quite large inaccuracies with them, but I think if anyone's done a DEXA and they were hoping for something low and then it's high, it's just this is just annoying.
Yeah, for sure. It's always, so I've probably done 1,000 in the past 5 to 10 years. And people are always disappointed. And so I just kind of you step on the scale every morning and you're just it's just a number. It's just a number. It doesn't matter. And so I take that approach, but I was just kind of curious. And because we had to train some new staff, I was let's get it. And they were whoa. So yeah, it's just a tool. I don't recommend anybody actually get a DEXA. It doesn't matter.
In terms of your competitive background, I think the listeners might be interested in that, because I don't know how much we've dug into it. You mentioned 2019 you competed. How many seasons have you done? What is it for you now?
Yeah, so this is my third season that I really count. You always have that first season where you have no idea what you're doing. You're just that was obnoxious. I'm just not going to count that one. So 2016 was my first good season with a coach who helped a lot. So Jeff Alberts has been my coach all 3 seasons. Very good guy. Really, I know the science of bodybuilding and hypertrophy and nutrition. And what I really lack and still struggle with occasionally is the artist part. So the posing, right? Because a little tweak here and there, man, it makes a world of difference on stage. And I'll probably put some of that stuff up on my Instagram so you can see how like you twist 3 degrees and you bend and you just look 5 pounds bigger or 2 kilos bigger. Um, so yeah, so 2016 first show, and this is a really good story. Nervous, small show. I think ended up doing 2 shows. So I did a show, finished like, I don't know, 5 out of 10 or something. Did a second show, felt better. And I was like, okay, maybe I can get like a top 3 or 4 or something in the open. Um, Definitely did not deserve that. Didn't get it. But right before the show, Cliff Wilson walks in and is absolutely shredded. Still to this day, the most shredded I've ever seen with someone in person. And just takes first, like takes everything, walks out. He's like, cool, got my pro card. Super nice guy. Chris Bearcat was also with him, like tanning him. And that was the first time I met Chris, and me and Chris are good friends. So it was just like natural bodybuilding, like just getting into it. Again, competing and training for it are different things, right? You have people, right, that you follow and stuff. So that was kind of like, that just blew my mind. I look back and I still have the video, and I was watching it yesterday, and I was like, man, I was not prepared to step on that stage with those people. So yeah, so 2016, first real show, did 2. It was kind of just like first attempt at shows. Took some time off and competed in 2019, did 3 shows. Did take an overall at a smaller show, took a third at a bigger show, and like placings don't really matter. It's just improvement is what I'm looking for. Looked way better. Like probably gained 2 kilos in that time, was way leaner. My legs really popped. I'd say from a bodybuilding perspective, my quads are just blow everything else away. So did that, felt really good about it, had a good time, good experience. It was hard, like the last 6 weeks, which I think you're at about in now. You kind of get like where you're doing a lot of steps or you're doing a lot of cardio, and my calories got down to like 1,500. And so just, it was a grind, but it was a really good experience. And so then 2019, we had COVID, all that. Didn't really get to train very much in hypertrophy for a while and do well, and felt like I improved, right? So the goal is to improve each season. So I took a 5-year break. And I did put on like probably 2 to 3 kilos of muscle. And I look way bigger. Very happy with that. And the whole time I thought back in 2016, I was like at my genetic potential. And I'm like, no way,
Love
dude,
that.
you were not even close. And I think I've still got another 2 to 3 kilos or like in between this and the next time I compete. So, it's really been perspective from a scientific standpoint to be like, oh no, like you can put on muscle with 20 years of training and good training, knowing what you're doing. You can continue to put on muscle. So yeah, that's kind of like to now. So competed last weekend, compete this weekend in IMBF show. I will hopefully make it to the natural. There's the Monster Mash, because it's like right down the road from where I live. I'm in Boston now, so there's shows everywhere. It's wonderful.
That's where Worlds is this year too. WMBF Worlds, right?
That's right. Worlds is like 5 minutes from my house. So I'll be there either competing or just hanging out, having a good time. And I think one of the from now to Worlds, it's like 8 or 9 weeks, and I'm already competing. So I think that's the struggle that I'm having mentally is, hey, I've got to hold not this tight of conditioning, but pretty close. Like maybe I gain a little bit of weight and I feel good because I'm eating in peak week, and I could probably make it. But it's also like a lifestyle thing, right? To be in prep for not 10 months overall. Yeah, that's a lot. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Having a great time. Feel much better now. And I have to eat like 400 carbs a day.
Nice. That's really cool actually hearing about your background. Out of interest, you mentioned the first season that you say you don't really count. What year was that?
It was like 2013, I think.
Ah, so
Yeah.
you've been officially competing for over a decade now.
Yeah, yeah. So and for the audience, I'm like mid 30s, so that makes sense, I guess.
Just because it's very similar to me. I first competed 2014, and now this is like my decade of competing year. This will be my fourth season, so we have quite
Nice.
similar. We didn't do the same like years, but we have a similar kind of stepwise. Didn't start off amazing, but every year progressively like looking better, adding tissue every single time, which is the main and most important thing, looking better, and then actually getting rewarded with that on stage, which is really cool. So it's nice. I think people like seeing, I know they like seeing my example of that because it gives some people faith who maybe lack that. But to know there's people like yourself as well who are just as dedicated and keep going as well is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's the bodybuilding of the sport, right, is especially the natural side. It's slow, it's hard, it's fun. Like if you love training, like that's what I tell people all the time. They're like, you work out, you train, I don't know, 5 to 8 hours a week, depending on the week. And it's like, it's my hobby, like it's my health hobby, but like I just love it. So it's not a big deal to me.
Yeah. How did you do at this past show, the one just the last weekend?
Yeah, so it was kind of like a medium sized show. So there was five in the overall, and I took third, but I was competing like, when you compete with someone who's like 20 pounds heavier than you, it's just it's hard. Um, and if they're even similar conditioning, it's just hard to stand next to somebody and compete with that amount of mass if they're like a couple inches taller, maybe. So I think that's what I've slowly learned is like a really good light heavyweight or heavyweight should conditioning, kind of equal destroy any like bantam or lightweights. But that doesn't always happen. And I think that's good. But yeah, I was just like out muscled on stage. And I'll post some pictures. You got like I took third. I didn't feel great about the placing, but I felt great about how I did, and I was comfortable. And on stage, I did like I wasn't nervous, and it's kind of like, oh no, you're a bodybuilder now. Like this is what you do. You get on stage and you pose, and it's normal. So yeah, I'll post some pictures up on Instagram at some point. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's the placing, like you said, is completely out of your hands, and you just have to focus on, was I proud of what I brought to stage and the way I presented myself? And you've got kind of the cobwebs off for the rest of the season now, which is great. But you're completely right, for people who aren't kind of, they don't go to shows often, or they haven't competed maybe often, or aren't aware, like a good heavyweight should almost always take that overall because of just the amount of muscle mass. For a bantam or lightweight to win, that is like, they have to be like extremely good, or the other people who turned up and won their class are just slightly subpar.
Yeah, for sure. But I did notice, so not to steer the conversation, but I was going to ask you about step counts because we have very similar step counts. Like I think it's like 12 to 14K or something. But so this show or this season, I have not done any cardio. It's all been steps. Really, like I have to run a little bit because of my job in the army and stuff. But so I have to have some basal level of, hey, you can run a 7.5 minute mile or a 15 minute 2 mile. Like that's the base I have to keep. But yeah, I was curious how that's treated you and just what you felt about it because I've loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if in any of my preps I've really done much cardio. The first one I did, this was when like the stubborn fat loss protocol from Lyle McDonald was very popular, and we are kind of running that, and man, that wasn't fun. And HIIT was quite popular at that time too. Whereas by the time I started competing in later seasons, steps were like all the rage. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis was like, oh wow, there's actually this thing that we should probably pay attention to, because I imagine my first prep, my steps were just abysmally low because I was just trying to save energy everywhere I could. I was very ignorant to that. Like you said, your first prep always goes that way. So since then, yeah, I've mostly relied on steps. The biggest difference from last season to this one is I'm not wearing a weighted vest, which is something I applied last time to try and take care of like that potential gravitostat from the research. And well, James Krieger kind of popularized that with Eric Salazar. So Salazar, I might say his name wrong, but yeah, I've not used the weighted vest this time, but it's a relief because my steps are just what I get naturally. Like I don't have to go out of my way to get additional steps. It's just, I know I commute to the gym, I walk my dog, and I land on these many steps, and it's a decent number, and I haven't had to change anything. So yeah, I quite like that. So yeah, so far no formal cardio. And Cliff said at the start, I'm working with Cliff Wilson, if you weren't aware, but he said we're trying to avoid adding cardio if we could.
Yeah, and I think so I kind of walk to the gym and it's like a mile and a half there and back. So it's like three miles, which is 6,000 to 7,000 steps depending. And then I also have two huskies, so like we walk our dogs quite a bit. And now that it's cooled off, it's not summer. It's like a mile a day is not abnormal. Sometimes up to 2 or 3. So.
Yeah, it's actually, you're doing a good job sat there in a vest. I'm like sat here and I'm like, I'm cold. I needed a long sleeve shirt on. Those carbs are treating you well, maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's warm right now. So this hat, like I also moved in the past year. And so the room I'm in gets a lot of sunlight in the mornings and it's like heated up, but I have been cold all the time for like the past 7 weeks at like normal room temperature. I'll be like having a sweater on and everybody's like, why do you have a jacket on? And I'm like, I am so cold.
A lot of people, Brandon, think that that's the body fat. They think it's just, oh, you're so lean that you're so cold. And I've always been skeptical that it's too much related to body fat. I think it is related to that, but I think it's often just an adaptive process. And that's the main thing, is the body is just like ramping down heat production to save calories. I don't know if there's actual research or if you have any thoughts on that, but it just came to mind because I'm always like, I think it's metabolism related more strongly than body fat related.
Yeah. So I think there are definitely cardiovascular and other changes that occur with prep. I've never really thought about this, so it's a great thing to bring up. Body temperature is regulated pretty strictly, but even like a small change you pick up, like a 0.05 degree change you pick up. So, I mean, it wouldn't be like it kind of makes sense because your metabolism does kind of down regulate, so you get like metabolic adaptation and stuff. And yeah, so it's probably a combination, but nobody's ever looked at that. And that's a great question. I'm gonna write that down somewhere.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for me at least. And out of interest too, you mentioned Jeff in your corner as your coach, and posing is a big thing. And I think a lot of people, again, especially non-competitors, aren't aware of how much you need to invest into posing. What is your kind of posing practice? What has it looked like at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different than a lot of bodybuilders, whereas I don't want to pose too much in the off season or really until I get lean. And the reason for that is because things change. Where you lose fat changes, how you hold muscle if you gain muscle between shows or competition, like seasons. And so I don't do a lot of posing until like the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks maybe. Um, and then it even changes. Like we changed last week to this week because it was like, all right, we see how that looked on stage. You're a little fuller now. Let's give it a little more of a twist. So I probably do at least 20 to 30 minutes a day. I would love to do more. It's just like an energy thing, right? And
So
there's a
what
couple,
already?
so much energy. So I go through the mandatories and what the different organizations would call out for their mandatories. I did a hamstring like flex last weekend for the first time, and I was like all kinds of wobbly. I was like, oh man, I practice this, but man, this is a bad pose for me. Like hamstrings look great. Me trying to do it, terrible.
I haven't been practicing that one.
Yeah, so we have OCB over here, and they do that, and they do standing on your calves. So like a calf.
Yes.
Yeah. So that one, the first time I did, I was like, whoa, it's a little weird. But it's not that hard. I think it's very rare that you stand on your calves or your toes when you're barefoot. Like that's kind of odd. But yeah, I try to practice posing as much as I can given the energy. And when you go work out, like you do legs and then you try to go pose, you're like, man, I got nothing. I got nothing.
Yeah, that's where I do my posing at the moment. It's just been 3 times a week. And I do it after I have upper body 3 times a week, and I just do it after my upper body sessions. Because if I try and do anything much after legs apart from walking, I'm just like, I am shot. So do you hold your mandatories for a certain period of time or anything like that? Is that something you have built in?
Yeah. So when I first started, it was just probably like a 2-second hold because really, I mean, other than that first round when they start like circulate you, you're not holding it for more than 3 or 4 seconds, hopefully, unless you got a mean judge. I've been through some rounds where I've had judges make me hold stuff for like 10 seconds. I'm like, you're rude. Um, but I like to ramp it up, just like training, right? So like the first time, 5 weeks out, maybe I'm holding for like a second or two. And then last night when I was posing, it's like, no, let's hold it for like 10 seconds, 80% flex, get any bit of muscular endurance like advantage you can, because if you gas out on stage and you lose your poses, you're done. And that actually happened in my last show. And I think probably why I didn't do as well as I wanted was they had us up there for about 12 minutes and I gassed out at like 10. So that last couple poses that they were deciding like, hey, they're moving people around, and maybe we can explain that to the audience too. But like I started to gas out and I have my back poses. So my back double wide spine, but my back lat spread is one where it's like my worst pose. So I hit one of those gas and I was like, no, this is bad. Like this is so bad. So yeah, I just want to avoid embarrassing myself on stage.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
The hitting your glutes and hamstrings for the back double bicep, but then maintaining your glutes and hamstrings, so you hold the same position basically, and then hit your rear lat spread. That's the thing I find quite tiring when I'm going through my poses out of everything. And also the front lat spread, maintaining that position with your quads on and your waist nice and small, the lats flared nicely, chest up, and hips back. It's like, yeah, it's a hard one. But I totally agree. By the way, I just wanted to reflect on off-season posing. I know a lot of people are really big on off-season posing, especially posing coaches quite often are. I don't think Jeff is, who is a posing coach, and he's a great posing coach. But I'm the same as you. I'm kind of like, why spend ages? Don't put too much emphasis on off-season posing. You're a completely different shape to when you come down, and you don't want to get bad habits. And then kind of building it up during your prep, I think is great. I don't like to start too close because of the energy. I like to build it in as a habit, and almost like, I don't know, there's like a sweet spot of like 10 weeks out maybe, or a little bit closer, where you're lean enough to hit the poses probably how you're going to hit them, but you've got enough energy where you're not so diet fatigued that it's like enjoyable almost.
Yeah, that's and I probably should have done that a little bit. Like 10 weeks, I like that number actually. Because if you're truly, so I was losing, I got my like spreadsheet up behind your screen, but I was losing about half a kilo a week. So 10 weeks out, I was probably close enough. But I think the older I've gotten, the more I've competed, the busier I've gotten outside of bodybuilding. And so it's like, that's the first thing to go, which is probably not the best, especially when you're competing and you're like putting on years of work. But that is just something like I struggle with personally, because it's not super fun until you're super lean.
Yeah, I totally relate. And then again, when you're cold and your energy levels are low, and it's just like, but like you said, for competing, like the specificity of it increases the closer you get to stage, and you have to prioritize it. It may even be better to be prioritized over losing a little bit more body fat. Might not pay off as much as nailing your posing even more. So yeah, I agree with you. I can't, especially for people who aren't, you get these genetic freaks who can just stand up there and it's just like, they don't even have to hit a front relax particularly well, and they still look very like symmetrical, great X frame. Whereas if you haven't been blessed with that, you got to work these poses to your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I even had a couple poses called, and I was like, me and Jeff had talked about it, and it's like, hey, if they call that pose and tell you to stick your leg out, don't. Like, it's not worth it. Like, it's not a good pose for you. Like, just take whatever it's going to aggravate them, because it may make the difference between like not winning and losing, but like, shuffling you around later. And so like with they call a front ab, and then sometimes you have to stick your leg out for your quad. And so last show I didn't really practice that one, so I just didn't do it. They called it, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna set my hips back and give you a straight shot. And the judges never said anything, but like sometimes you can also make those trade-offs too.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know where I heard it, but it was like, if you haven't got it, don't hit it. It was something along those lines. Or I heard, it may have been like Jordan Peters, if you know, Trained by JP over here in the UK, is very big. I think I heard somewhere, it's like he tries to avoid hitting his front relaxed as much as he can. He just like hit most musculars when he stood front on. As a judge, that would frustrate the hell out of me, to have someone not hit like a proper mandatory. But if it's like one of those small things, I think as a judge, you might even miss whether or not you've hit it or not. So especially when it's that small. But if someone does catch you and it's a poor shot, that could, not lean in your favor. So I totally get that. And that's some of the art of bodybuilding too. It's like, can you inch a bit further ahead of the line that you're meant to be on, like to look a bit bigger, little things like that. But I would also be interested, Brandon, to hear about what your peaking process was like. Obviously, you're in a peak week now. You had a peak week just go by. How did you run that with Jeff?
Yeah, so our peaks are really bland. I'm gonna say there's no like super exciting things. So my standard low day, we'll say, going in the last like 3 or 4 weeks, I had one refeed per week, but standard low day was, let's say, 40 grams of fat, 150 grams of protein, and 200 carbs. That was kind of like standard. So like what is it, Wednesday, and we're competing Sunday. So today I'll have 350, 400 carbs. Tomorrow I'll have 350, 400 carbs, protein, fat are the same. And then Saturday, so the day before, we'll kind of look and see. And if I'm full or if I'm not full, we'll adjust. But right now it's about 300 carbs. We ran something very similar last week where, it's basically like a 3-day build up before. And it's not an insane amount of carbs. Yes, it's like double technically, but it's not like 1,000 grams. Like, it's not a rapid backload. It's just a phase approach, very conservative, very safe. I'm very lean, so that helps. Like I was ready probably a week ahead of time. I've still lost probably like, oh, I don't know, a quarter kilo or something in between last week and this week, and that was with eating like 2,600 calories for like 4 or 5 days. So generally same peak week last week and this week, just increase the carbs by like 250 or 300. Yeah.
Nice. And I guess your sodium and fluid intake just roughly kept level. You don't load on either of those or anything like that.
No, and I've done that before. It's annoying, like from an actual practical perspective. From like this perspective, we do sodium right before stage, like a couple packets of sodium, which is a lot of people do that, like piece of candy, sodium, go get on stage. But like water manipulation, like it's not, I think where I'm to the point where like it's not worth the risk of something going awry, that like we're just gonna ride it. Like we feel good, I look good, I like how I look. Like I don't want to take a risk. Now that's not to say maybe later in the shows, like, so I got these 2 shows, basically warm-up shows. If I make it to Worlds, there's a couple shows in between I might do, and maybe then I'll try some like novel techniques and be like, did that work or did it not work? Right. So, and I think it's, I would say anyone competing in bodybuilding or just physique in general, like do a couple shows in your season, like at least 2, because you're just not going to get that lean that often.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I work with quite a few first timers, which I love because, man, if I can make their first prep experience like a really positive one, I know how important that was for me for buy-in for the rest. And I know how many people give up after their first season because crazy expectations, like they don't give themselves enough time, they don't get lean enough, they do silly peaking approaches, whatever it might be. They come in out eating disorder and hate the sport. So anyway, I love working with first timers, but I always encourage them because they often are like, oh, I'm just going to do this one show, it's local, whatever. I'm like, that's great, find another one, at least two, because like you said, the first one, it just never goes amazingly. You don't know what to expect, even if you've been to shows before. Like you just learned so much at that first one. So I completely agree there. And then your peaking approach actually sounds very familiar in many ways because it's something I love using. Is a very conservative peak with a lot of my clients. Kind of that mid-load, you have 2 days of being able to load up, a third day of like, hey, we could top off or clean up if we need to, if you've spilled a little bit, or if we need to top you off a little bit more, we can take you in. And I do very little sodium and water manipulations typically too. And I've tried many different peaking approaches. I tried a very extreme, in 2017, I think it was, like a very extreme, like water load, and I had loads of sodium as well, and deplete for like a week, and then like a week load. That was practically not something I would ever want to do again because I was not alive for like at least 1 week. I was like, I can't give this to clients because they'll literally crash. I could sleep at home because I had the ability to do that as an online coach, what have you. So back then I didn't have half the roster I have now, basically. So anyway, the route I'm going down is I typically do those very conservative approaches, but this year working with Cliff, he's just sent me across a peak week. And so I'm like, whoa, that's like, it was, it's almost a little bit scary. I'm very apprehensive because it's something I'm not used to, but the water loading is the thing where I'm like, I'm barely having a gallon of liquids and it's like 2.5. I'm like, whoa, I'm going to be peeing so much. And I already feel like I'm peeing like a horse. So yeah, I imagine that's part of it that you're like, is the stress and the risks worth the reward? And obviously Cliff is a master of a rapid backload. And that's why I brought him into my corner, was like, can this guy take me to another level? So I'm very excited for it at the same time, but apprehensive.
Yeah. And I've never done a true rapid backload like Cliff runs. I think that you definitely, he's a like if you look at his clients, he's a master with it, but I think he's done it so much, he's figured it out probably better than anyone else. We actually, so me, Helms, Trexler, and Peter Fishton wrote a open access like manuscript or review on bodybuilding, and part of it has peak weeks, and there's like, oh, here's all your options, and here's how like the science behind the water loading and the science behind the salt intake. And I think there's even been kind of like an update on that on just peak weeking, which is interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it. And you'll see a little bit different with each coach, but I was surprised and kind of disheartened with backstage. And this was we'll call it not, like a semi-local show, with some of the really weird practices I see. Like one of the guys was like, yeah, I haven't had water in like 2 days. And one of them was like, I haven't eaten in like 4 days. And I'm like, guys, do you know, like, right? Because you don't, and sometimes their coach is standing right there, and like my coach is not there. And I'm also like, hey, I'm on, like, check me out on Instagram, guys. I'm just a scientist. I don't know what I'm doing, but you might want to rethink some of that. Yeah. So it like you hear all these, well, they're not horror stories, but stories, and you're like, people still do that. Most people outside of the big, like, evidence-based, like, community still do crazy things in prep. And I think when you get to the world level, the world stage, like, yes, those people probably aren't doing crazy things as much, and they all have probably good coaches, or have competed long enough to have figured it out. But man, I'm curious how this weekend is going to go, because it's a bigger show. It's like more of a regional show. It's pro qualifier. We have, I think there's like 50 or 60 or 70 competitors. I should have like a full bantamweight class. So yeah, I'm curious, but I'm just like, ooh, this community is not quite where we want to be yet.
See the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We create the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. Additionally, you get access to our exclusive Revive Stronger member site, where you'll be able to watch over hundreds of hours worth of educational content. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Yeah, I see it as well. And often, like you said, some of those practices where very often people are not having fluids on show day, having sips, barely anything, which I'm not particularly fond of. And then starving yourself for 4 days before getting on stage. I mean, unless you've got tons of body fat to lose, it's just a recipe for disaster. I also see people like pounding lots of food backstage, like rice cakes, honey, peanut butter. I'm like, have you just seen that people do this and then you're really hungry, so you're just like, let's stuff myself full of this? I'm like, that it's not really going to do much for you on stage. It could make things worse if you're bloated or what have you. So yeah, it's definitely getting better, I would say, but there's still a lot of I don't know if it's the kind of enhanced side impacting the natural side, because I think a lot of our practices come from the enhanced side, and there's obviously water manipulations they might need to make due to the PEDs they're taking, but it's just not something we have to worry about at all. So this next show, did you say it's called the Muscle Mash or is it the Monster Mash? I can't, or are those two different shows and I've got them confused?
No, so the show this weekend is the Natural Mania. It's a WNBF show, and then there's one in November, the Monster Mash, which is I think one of the bigger shows around.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Worlds is in the end of November, right before Thanksgiving, which is also a little dangerous.
Yeah.
it's like okay.
You haven't qualified for Worlds yet, then? Have you, or?
No, and I haven't, and that's what I'm. Like I would love to get so I don't have my pro card. I'd love to get my pro card, right? That's everybody's kind of first goal, and then compete as a pro to qualify for Worlds. The chances of that happening are very low. I think I could qualify for Worlds as an amateur, but I think I'm just not quite. It's weird. Like I'm at the top of my weight class. I'm probably the leanest I'll ever be, or I've ever been, for sure, ever been. I could get a little leaner, and I'm fairly symmetrical. Like I don't have any big gaps. My arms are not as big as I wish they were, but like who's aren't, right? So yeah, I'm curious how it's going to go, but I'm going to give it a couple shots, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's one of those where I do think it's a good idea that you're doing several shows, just because like you don't know who's going to turn up on the day. Not that you're trying to pick like, I don't know, you see people pro card hunt and they're literally just looking for the easiest shows to win a pro card. That's not what you're doing. You're just doing shows to give yourself more opportunities. And yeah, we have a very similar season kind of mapped out in terms of I have a couple of qualifiers before then Worlds, which I hope to qualify. That ultimately I wanted to get to Worlds, but if I could get there as a pro, wow, that would be something special. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, it's going to be tough because the standards are just crazy nowadays.
They really are. It's like you've got to be big and lean and good at everything, and it's crazy. So one of my friends is Gary Amlinger, and I took second, and I helped him a little bit, but he worked with Cliff mostly. And like you look at this guy, and you're like, you took second. But I cannot imagine someone bigger and like more symmetrical. And then he sends next to like who took first last year.
It wasn't Babacar. Well, no, it was the year before. It was Bada, not Bada. Yeah, Barda? No, I'm thinking of. There's a
I
good
can't.
guy's name. He won like the overall like the last 2 years or whatever, and he won it again. I've forgotten his name. It's very frustrating. There'd be someone
Yeah,
screaming out like Eric Helms if he's listening.
yeah, for
He'll know
sure.
exactly who.
Anyway, so yeah, I was actually listening to their podcast on like top 5 natural bodybuilders, and I was like, okay, I can get behind some of those. Like, I haven't actually didn't know like one or two of them, but like some of them, I was like, yeah, I've seen that person. They're very very legit.
David Kay, did you not? You weren't aware of David Kay? Maybe he was the British guy.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
that
the
was the guy.
condition, crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like, I can remember seeing Brian Whitaker for the first time and his conditioning, and just like it was on social media, and I was like, that's possible. That's like humanly possible. Now I'm looking at it again, and I'm looking at mine, and I'm like, I mean, I'm not there, but I'm pretty close. Like I could lose a little bit more and get, closer. I have glute striations, which is I think the goal. So we'll see.
This is the thing that I'm waiting for is I've not seen my glutes fully through from the back. I'm like, I want lines from butthole all the way through arse cheek. I've got like one quite visible one from the rear, but nothing else. I'm like, I'll be the deplete. I'm imagining from looking at what Cliff sent across, I imagine that's actually going to strip off quite a bit of body fat just in that period of time. So it'll be interesting to see if, I don't know, when you're that lean, sometimes if you're holding onto not that I want to blame water at all. I think I should be able to get lean enough where it's not a water thing, but I'll be interested to see if any of that clears some of what might be masking condition.
Yeah. Well, I think for like people so even people like us who don't ever get like super overweight in between shows or seasons or whatever, like I was an overweight / obese kid growing up, and then found, strength training and soccer, and kind of slowly in my mid-20s became more of like what looked like a bodybuilder. But like the skin, I actually have a little extra skin, and so it actually affects some of my front poses, where like you can tell when there's fat there because there's something between this like skin layers. But like a lot of people, you can see just straight skin and you're like, wow, like that little fold blocks my left glute striation. And I'm like, it's not fat, it's there, it's being blocked. So how do I pose to get that to stretch out just enough so we can see it? And that's when you're really trying to dial things in. And I'm still trying to figure some of those out.
Yeah, you see, there's some competitors who just have this paper thin skin look. And it's like, I don't know how much of that is genetics. Like they just have that ability to like have barely any subcutaneous body fat and show it really well. Whereas I don't know. I think some people, it's that balancing act of the fatigue and the stress that could be hiding condition, but you need to have dug to have got that lean in the same place. So that's where a coach really comes in and helps navigate that for you. Is that something you found with Jeff, where he can just kind of tell you what to do, and where you might have been, I don't know, sometimes you get in your own head, you can be a bit reactive, you can focus on just doing?
Yeah, I really so I've coached bodybuilders, but I'm a really good follower, a really good like client. Like I will listen and do what you say, like within 1 or 2%. Like, okay, so maybe I miss my carbs by like 3, yeah, whatever. Maybe I'm off by like 500 steps occasionally. That stuff happens. But I just like being coached. I've always liked it. Like I grew up playing a lot of sports. It's just kind of second nature to me. I do enough leadership stuff where I have to get up in front of people and lead and like tell them what to do and manage emotions and manage situations. And it's in the military. It's sometimes it's very stressful. So I'm very happy to sit back and be like, no, I'm just gonna, Jeff, what are we doing this week? Like I'm doing my own training, just because it's easy and I can adapt it. But yeah, he just gives me the nutrition, and if there's anything that he like we're not sure about, we'll talk about. Like he's like, how does it, like, you feel good about that? And I'll be like, yeah. And every time he's asked me, I've been like, yeah, that's great, let's do it.
Perfect. Yeah, you sound very similar to me, Brandon. I was coached my first season, and then the last 2 I did myself / had people in my corner I could consult with. Whereas this time, again, I was just like, maybe Cliff can take me somewhere I haven't been able to take myself. So I just wanted to invest everything into this season, and yeah, being able to have, I'm the same. I love being led. Like I don't know, I can lead, but it's not something I love doing. And so for someone who I trust to tell me what to do, I love it. It's literally just like, give them the numbers, they tell me what to do, sold, I trust you, let's go. And yeah, it's also nice to have clients like that. So I hope they appreciate it on their end too, to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. They're like, you don't get that trust right away. You have to kind of like earn it as a client and coach. So I think that's where, like, I thought about going with a different coach, and Jeff probably won't listen to this, but I just to learn more different things. Like Cliff does a very unique coaching style and backload and stuff. And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to do that and just learn? Because I'm like a scientist at heart now. I always have all these questions. And so, and it's finally, I was like, well, this will be easier. I think I know I'm not going to take like even probably like top 3 at Worlds in my weight class or something. Like I'm not there yet, if I can ever get there. So this season, I'm like, let's feel good. Let's get leaner than you've ever gotten. Let's show it off. And then maybe in a few more years, come back and then really like put it all on the line one last time. Or maybe not one last time. We always say like one last time, but some of the guys are competing at like 50 plus. And I'm like, nah, you're still huge. Don't worry.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's part of the reason, obviously, being in our shoes, we have so many good coaches that could come to mind to be able to work with. But yeah, Cliff was the one where I was like, hey, like, you do some interesting stuff. I kind of want to dive into that and see what I can take and apply. And because I like the approach Jeff is taking with you, that's the sort of approach I often take myself. I was like, that feels comfortable and very normal. And I trust those guys completely. And I've seen good results that way. But let's see if there's something a little bit spicy and different out there with what Cliff is doing. I'm also doing my own training. So it's interesting you've also taken that yourself too. What does your training look like at the moment, out of interest? Has it changed at all as you've kind of got leaner? Have you had to make any adaptations?
Yeah. So outside of the last 2 weeks, because I think peak week is like a different conversation for training. I've been on a upper lower split twice a week. It's really the same training I've been doing for the past year or two. Like, I think there might be a couple swaps in machines or cables versus dumbbells that I've made, like for biceps, just because it feels better, or there's less chance of maybe getting like tendonitis or something. The reps haven't changed. The sets kind of fluctuate a little bit between like 3 and 5. So I'm in that 12 to 20 range that you hear about for hypertrophy. My strength has declined. I mean, I've lost 20 pounds, so it's probably on a relative level gone up, but on a like load plates on the machine, it's gone down probably like 5 to 10%, depending on the lift. I think these past 2 weeks, I've kind of cut out a lot of the lower body stuff, or just really light intensity. Upper body, you go to RPE 8 and do the same thing and you're fine. Like I'm not doing things that are novel and going to make me sore. So that's the main goal, is avoid soreness before your show. But yeah, I haven't really, my training's pretty vanilla. Like I'm very much a twice a week, at this stage. Once I started entering a deficit, I was like, all right, twice a week, each muscle group, for 3 to 5 sets, and just let's keep it simple.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that 5 to 10% strength drop sounds like very reasonable from what I've heard with people in my experience too. And the Wilks score is something I always like to think of. So the strength to body weight ratio, because I think that's important to realize that you are so much smaller, and that is going to impact your ability to perform. And it's not necessarily indicative of muscle loss in that sense. At least that's where I view it. I know, I don't know if you heard the podcast I did with Mena Henselmans, and he also did a post on this where it's like, you should be gaining performance in a diet. And if you're maintaining performance, that can even be a sign of muscle loss because of the neurological adaptations. Of course, I don't want to take them out of context, because I think it was for more novel movements, more new movements. probably not a contest prepper, but yeah, anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I've kind of gone through it. I don't know if you had any thoughts on what Menno said there. I don't know if you even saw it.
Yeah, so it's probably been a while. I don't remember. Again, don't want to take them out of context. I'll jump off from this point. So there's been a couple of detraining studies coming out since the past year or two, and I'm reviewing them. I think I did one for weightology and now reps. And I am not sure, based on the data available in the literature, that if you're eating a high protein diet, losing weight at a slow rate, right? So our physique recommendations are like 0.25 to 0.5% body weight per week. And training hard, like you're actually going to lose that much muscle. I'm just like biochemically, right? So I have some biochemistry training for my PhD. It's just like, I don't like if there's fat available and you're eating enough protein, why would your body strip muscle off of yourself when you need it? That just doesn't make a lot of sense because it's very hard to do, right? And that's where you think of efficiency in the human body. It tries to be super efficient. That's why we down-regulate our metabolic adaptation occurs. It's like, no, we need to conserve energy, be efficient. So I'm not convinced that bodybuilders, even natural ones who do it like very slowly, very conservatively, lose much muscle at all. Like I just, the data isn't there. So we should probably like do a study on that, but just not confident.
Yeah, thank you for answering it in that way, because that's a good way of approaching that question in a way that makes a lot of sense. And did you mention your protein? Did you say you were at 150 or 115 grams?
Oh, 150. So okay. Yeah, so it's a gram per pound or 2.1 grams per 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that's body weight, not lean mass, because I don't, even though I have a DEXA, I could do lean mass. I'm in the camp of let's give protein recommendations on body weight because that's just way more practical.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I know Jeff has ran relatively low, like it looks less than a gram per pound for himself. So I wasn't sure if he was applying maybe I think it's 0.7 per pound as like the lower end of like the evidence-based recommendations here. I don't know if he'd be tempted to run that with some of his competitors.
Yeah, and I was originally eating. I mean, I was also heavier. That's the other thing. So I've always been about a gram per pound of body weight, like off season and season. We are like, I didn't have a coach during this time. I did try a couple cycles where I did like a specialization cycle with a higher protein and went up to like 1.5 because there's some evidence to suggest it just kind of is magical macronutrient and you don't gain fat when you increase your protein. And like you look at some of the studies and like, you don't might as well try it. And I think it's so hard with N of 1. I liked it and I'll probably do it again. Put it that way. I think it worked for a little while.
Yeah.
I'm not sure though.
Yeah, it's funny because initially when I started with Cliff, again, one of his things is he likes high protein. And so I've been running at like 235, 240 grams of protein, given I'm under 180 pounds now. So it's quite high, but now I like it. And I'm just like, hey, I enjoy this. I don't know. Again, it's N equals 1. I think it may have helped me diet on higher calories potentially a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure why. Like obviously there's lots of theory there, but like the thermic effect of feeding, so there's not much there. But like you said, some of this research tries to show that it's like not free, like it's kind of this bit of magic that's going on, and obviously magic doesn't compete with science, so we know that's not happening. But yeah, it's interesting to hear kind of where your protein is. I tend to run a 1 gram per pound traditionally as well, just because I'm like, hey, it might be a bit overkill sometimes, but I have a preference for it and I'd prefer to be a bit over than under on that. In terms of, I had some questions that I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to talk about prep wise. Maybe we could, if you have more, feel free to go, or we could talk about your ambitions for the rest of the season, which I think you have the 2 shows and then hopefully Worlds.
Yeah. So we can move wherever you want. Yeah, I think we covered prep pretty well.
Cool. I'll be keeping up to date, and that'll be over on mostly your Instagram, right? brob_21, so people can check out. I know your stories, you've been putting up some posing, not too much on the feed. I don't know if there's anything on the feed just yet.
No, and I need to do more. I'm just so strapped for time that I'm gonna try to do like a first two shows recap and maybe like a couple reels or something. It's just like I've got a pretty big lab now. We've got like 6 or 7 projects going. I'm just like I'm just struggling to get my steps in sometimes.
That's fair enough. That's absolutely fair enough. So yeah, one of the questions I had was, obviously there's been in the last 10 months, quite a bit of research has come out. And one of them that comes to mind regarding protein was the study from, and I'm going to say his last name wrong, and I always apologize, but apparently he finds it funny anyway, John Tromblin, on his like no upper limit to MPS. Obviously they studied 100 grams. Did that change any of your thoughts surrounding protein recommendations through the day?
Yeah, so I love that study. There were some like nitpicky things, but I think in the grand scheme of theory and how we think about protein intake, it is going to go down as like one of the seminal studies, which is amazing. Like Jordan is a great guy. So I would be inclined to say there you could probably take in more protein, and I will probably lean protein heavier going into my off season. And as I gain muscle, because now we've figured out that protein synthesis and oxidation, right, are not the same, and they don't track together. And so that means that if you eat more protein, potentially, like there's a lot of steps in between these things that we need to figure out. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple studies on that. But yes, I am like, okay, there might be a paradigm shift coming. Not ready yet, but I'm conservatively optimistic that we could probably get away with more protein than we thought, and it'd be beneficial for muscle growth.
And I guess in addition to that, not as concerned about spacing, like having, I don't know, it was like at some point it was this muscle protein full effect, and then every like 3 hours you need to get more protein in. And obviously that was based off kind of studies that weren't practically always relevant anyway, like whey protein studies. So have your recommendations for protein dosing also modified a little bit given the evidence?
Yeah. So for practical reasons, no. But I think it does lend well to, and you're the first person I think I've really had a good conversation with this about, because somebody else covered it for one of the research reviews. But I think it potentially gives you a good reason to have a very high protein meal, like at night, and not worry as much about like frequency during the day. So, and the time restricted feeding literature really syncs with that, where it's like, actually, if you have a big bolus of protein, so in the morning, and then you have your fasted window, and you have one at night, and you're spreading it out, and you look at the muscle protein synthesis curves, you're like, like we thought there was a refractory period, and there's really not. So like maybe we don't need it every 3 or 4 hours. Maybe we need it every 8 hours. And that's where I think some of these studies are going to come in and fill in the gaps of most of the protein synthesis studies are one serving, fasted, like 5 to 8 hours, and that's it, right? I don't know how, and I work with two people who do this like regularly. I'm like, how has nobody done like an every like 12 hours for like 4 days, like protein dosing study yet? I'm like, this blows my mind. And they're like, well, we got other stuff to do first. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, yeah, it's not my line of research. So you do you. But yeah, there's a lot of gaps still. And I would love to see the literature start going away from like soy versus whey versus like, the different types of new proteins that we're coming up with, and just say, hey, let's really nail down timing and amount, because we've got the whey is better with 12 grams of EAAs figured out. Like that's been known for like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think it opens up like for people practically many different ways of doing it. And there's, I think also, like you said, with the time restricted feeding, and then there's people doing like intermittent fasting, it opens up that those aren't as suboptimal as we thought, because they don't so much clash against a nutrient timing paradigm that maybe isn't so much necessary. Practically getting all your protein in one sitting is pretty tough. There'll be a lot of meat or whatever, a combination of various things. And then there was also, I think, some research that came out looking at leucine again and kind of questioning the leucine threshold. I don't know if that's something that you had seen as well.
Yeah, so I haven't reviewed that one, but I've covered leucine enough for different people and different topics that I think given, so essential amino acids are going to matter more than just leucine. So the combination of essential amino acids, which kind of like I mentioned, needs to be somewhere between like 10 and 12. It's like the literature splits, like it does like a number and then a higher number, and it's like somewhere between these two numbers. So it's like 10 to 15, but I think 10 to 12 per serving to get that maximal anabolic effect. Now, when you go with like meals versus EAAs versus just leucine versus whey, what you have is the time it's increased, so muscle protein synthesis changes, right? And so that's something we care about too. And I have to look back at the specific study, but I think that's probably what's happening is it's like actually leucine is not as important as we thought, as long as you have a full complement of EAAs.
Yeah. When I saw, I think you described that really well. When I saw that and then combination with the MPS research that came out, I was just like, hitting your protein by the end of the day is just, that's always been the number one recommendation put out there by the experts, which is great. But it's just anyone who's trying to like hack protein to make you gain more muscle, it's pretty tough like to do that. The body's pretty good at just making the most out of what it's given. And most people are going to have probably 3 servings somewhat spread through the day, and you're probably getting every bit of benefit you kind of can at that point. At least that's the way I kind of was just like, this is a load off the bodybuilder's mind. I think a lot of like anal bodybuilders are probably going to be a bit upset because they like their timings and the fact that it's going to really have a significant impact.
Yeah, I would say so. Like if I'm eating 150 grams, I have a habit of having a snack, so I like my protein bar every day. It's just a habit, like a personal thing. But so I do 40 grams roughly, and then a protein bar like split in between breakfast and lunch. That's like 20 to 30 grams. So I'm like right in there. And then, you've always got the food with like the protein that doesn't, incomplete protein, we'll call it, which I think is something else that we probably need to revisit in terms of, hey, if you're at the upper threshold of protein intake, don't worry about incomplete proteins. Like you're fine. Like you're doing great.
That's something else that I'd seen coming out where it's just becoming more abundantly clear that a vegan diet can be supportive of muscle hypertrophy, especially if you're getting like a good range of different like sources, which most people are. And then you chuck in some soy there, which is like pretty equivocal towards whey and things. Pea is pretty damn good. I think, I'm still on the side of like, can I let go of my like high quality animal sources? My good girlfriend's vegan. I bring this up so often, but that's why I think about it a bit more than maybe your average person would. But I'm like, especially because the animal sources, I mean, there's minimal carbs and fat associated with them. So they're quite like prime S tier sources in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's nice. I think, so my wife is also, she's not vegan or vegetarian, but we eat a ton of vegetables, and I'm sure you guys do too. But we do have probably like one meal a week that doesn't have any like meat in it, like dinner. So like I think that's pretty reasonable. I don't think you need like all animal protein all the time. It gives us a lot more freedom, and there's some other health benefits, right, associated with red meats and pork, and like that you're like, okay, if I'm gonna be like the best bodybuilder I can be, great. But if I'm just trying to like get big and look good naked and have a healthy life and longevity type stuff, well, then I really want a well-rounded diet. So it gives us a little more flexibility now.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually interested. I'm kind of aware to some extent of the health benefits of red meat because of like carnivore, and that's like very much like, red meat, it has all these micronutrients, but I've never really heard it spoken about pork. You mentioned it though, so I just wondered, and pork is something I almost don't eat at all. So I'm just interested to hear what you get maybe from pork.
Um, that's a good question. And it's actually stems from just a personal preference for my wife. She doesn't
Okay.
like to eat pork. Yeah. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it other than it tends to be fattier depending on the cut.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said health benefits of having pork. I think you
No,
meant,
no.
yeah, no, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I probably did. My bad. I
No, it's all right.
miscommunicated you.
That makes more sense to me because I think, yeah, pork is one of those ones that most people end up having bacon or sausages. It's like these refined, smoked things maybe aren't the best for health. And so, yeah, pork's one I also just try and avoid for like ethical reasons. Learning that they were like one of the more intelligent animals was kind of one of the turning points for me. I was like, there's kind of health pros to not having it, and then like ethical reasons that I kind of align with my way of wanting to live, which is nice. So anyway,
Yeah.
anything else in terms of research that's come out over the last like 10 months that springs to mind for you? I have, obviously, there's been the higher volume research papers like the Enos paper that came out that was a lot of hype, and more length and partial type research that's come through. Anything there that kind of springs to mind of things that you found particularly interesting?
So this is funny. So I mentioned I re-listened to our old podcast. One of the things I talked about on that podcast was something that happened at a conference where I'm sitting around with all these muscle scientists, and I just posed the question, hey, how much, like in a given amount of time, how much muscle can you gain? Like in 12 weeks, let's say. And they all kind of looked at me and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay. So like just given like a standard good training program, like a kilo of lean mass, and we'll say lean mass via DEXA, there's, caveats, but whatever. I was just like, just give me a number. Like the student asked you, what do you say? And none of them had an answer. And so I'm like, okay, we can fix this. So I've like recruited this team of superhero muscle hypertrophy people, and we're going to try to figure out, and it won't be perfect, but how much muscle you can gain given different measurements. So like biopsies or MRI or ultrasound, over a certain period of time. And so this is kind of like there's probably 20 people working on this project, 20 scientists. And it's going to be this huge meta-analysis, and I'm super excited about it. But so it hasn't allowed me time to look too much into other things because I'm like running this massive like project over here. But I thought you'd find that interesting because I think the volume question, like we won't answer it, but it will be in our models. And so I think with the Barbelo study being retracted, it kind of like takes away some of that super high volume stuff. And then Schoenfeld's work has kind of shown, moderate, it's like 12 to 20 sets, it seems like is normal. But nothing in volume has really stuck out recently. But we're working on some stuff.
That will be interesting because that was one of the things, at least that came into question on some of Brad's higher volume studies, where they grew a lot more muscle than in other studies that have looked at like higher volume. So it's like, your meta-analysis will kind of give us an answer of what seems reasonable. So that will be exciting, and we'll have to dig into that once that is available. Do you think that will come out next year?
Yeah, if we're lucky. Like honestly, it's big. Like we're extracting 650 studies right now, data from them, and like lots of stuff from them. So training status, volume, age, we even have like protein type information in there. And who knows what's going to make it into the final like meta-analysis models. But I actually have Zach Robinson doing our stats on that, and he's really good. And yeah, it'll probably be like mid 2026, maybe the end. Probably we'll say this time. Yeah, in about a year and a half, we'll say.
You've really peppered our Angus. I don't know why that phrase comes to mind, but
yeah. Sorry.
You're a bit of a bunny boiler for research, but this is how long it's good to. That's why I was like next year, because I was like, these things I know they take a long time to get done, but yeah, that's exciting. Brandon, anything else on your end you want to share, let the listeners know about? Otherwise, it's been a fantastic chat, and I'm excited to watch the rest of your season.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I'm also excited to watch you kind of like peak into your first show and go through your season, and hopefully I'll see it at Worlds.
Yes.
So yeah, just having a lot of fun right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, hopefully we can catch up in person for the first time at Worlds. And I wish you all the best of luck with the rest of your season. And if people, like I said before, if they want to follow along, Instagram is brob_21. So people can catch you there. And then, yeah, obviously, probably many of them are part of the research reviews and see your name as part of those, which is great.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Brandon, again. And we'll catch you soon. Take care.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.